Hello everybody, Chris here, and in this video we're going to be using LibreOffice Base in order to set up a connection with a MySQL database that we can reference from other parts of the LibreOffice suite as basically a data source. So in order to get started in LibreOffice Base, which if you don't know is mostly for connecting to databases or setting up local embedded databases, you can get started by going to File, New inside of it, and going to Database, or just hitting Control-N while you're within LibreOffice Base. And it's going to give you three different options in the database wizard. You can either create a new database, a HSQL DB embedded, open an existing database file, one you've already created, which can be a connection to something like a MySQL database, or to connect to an existing database. Now, this this probably means a database that's outside of LibreOffice, but could be on your company network, could be on your computer, or anywhere else. And really, what we're going to need here is the information in order to connect to the database. We can select one of these, and I'm going to go ahead and go with MySQL. Because that's the type of database that we're connecting to. And you're going to have to choose one of the database connectivity types. In this case, I'm going to use Jdbc, Java Database Connectivity, which does require you to have the jar file for this installed, the Jdbc driver. Okay, go ahead and hit Next. So the part that may be confusing is database name, server, port number, and the information, this information that you need to be able to connect to the database. In this case, I know the information because this is a local database on my computer, so I can go ahead and put this in. If you're talking about a work database you may need to connect to, you may need to go talk to someone like the database administrator or a superior, whoever has the database information. You'll need to get the info from them, including username and password. But here we're going to try to connect to this phpMyAdmin database within this instance of MariaDB, which is basically a extension of MySQL. And so we're going to put in phpMyAdmin as the database name, because that's the database that we're trying to connect to here. And the server is going to be basically localhost, so 127.0.0.1 to reference localhost. I believe just putting in localhost would also work here. If your server, or if your database server is not your computer, it's going to be something else here. Default for MySQL is port 3306. It may be hosted on a different port. You'll have to find out. If you're hosting it yourself, then yeah, for instance, just check whatever tool you're using to manage it. So in this case, I'm using the XAMPP control panel, which starts and stops my MySQL database, and you can see it's running on port 3306. And of course, the Jdbc driver class should be left default. Unless you have a good reason to change it, just use the defaults. The username for the database, or a username, in order to connect to the database and have access to all the tables, in this case is root. Normally, on a database, especially a live one, which was internet accessible or something like that, you would not have root as the username. You'd probably be given an alternate username that has a lot less privileges. But just know that you need a username and optionally the password, probably the password too, of a user that has access to the database you're trying to connect to. So in this case, I need a user that can access the phpMyAdmin database. And there's no password for this because XAMPP, XAMPP, is mostly just for local web development, so it doesn't need any security features. But normally it would. And where it says, do you want the wizard to register the database in LibreOffice? I would just go ahead and hit yes, register the database for me to simplify the process. After it's been saved, what do you want to do? Open the database for editing. Go ahead and do that. I'll hit finish. We can save this as a new database file. In this case, it's basically a file containing the connection to our real database. and it'll store some local information. But ultimately, the actual database is on another location. It's in my MySQL setup, or wherever the server is set up for this. So I'll just put test2 for right now and hit save. And you can see that it's already brought up the database with a list of tables that are accessible within that database. So now I could start doing things like creating views, adding extra tables, assuming you have permission to do so, or writing queries to pull out some information out of that database. And in other parts of LibreOffice, we can reference this data source, the test2.odb file, in order to pull in information from this MySQL database and use it within LibreOffice. So for right now, I'll just go ahead and do a design query. So we'll just pick the first database here, PMA_bookmark, add that, and maybe we want to get all IDs and users from the database, and we'll go ahead and run that query, F5. And as you can see, there's actually no users or IDs stored within the database because it's basically a brand new fresh install. So that's about what I would expect. But it does return the user and ID columns, and it is working properly. Now, if you run into any issues while you're trying to connect to your database, especially if you're using the Java option through the Jdbc connector, go to Tools, Options, Advanced within any part of LibreOffice, and make sure you have User Java Runtime Environment checked, and you have one of the radio buttons for one of the versions of Java checked there. And lastly, for class path, you do need to be referencing an actual MySQL connector. That's a Jdbc. So if you don't know how to install this, I'll link another video that I just put out that shows you how to install the Jdbc connector driver, and then you can reference this and connect to the database properly. So thanks for watching. I've been Chris. I hope this helped some of you guys out there. If you found this helpful, consider donating to my Patreon, and I'll see you in my future videos.